The spacecraft ascended smoothly through Earth's atmosphere, leaving the blue planet behind. Kale, Lyra, and Vren sat in silence, their eyes fixed on the viewscreen as the swirling clouds gave way to the vast expanse of space. For a moment, none of them spoke. They were too busy processing everything they had experienced, the dangers, the beauty, and the lessons that Earth had taught them. When they finally broke orbit, Lyra turned to her companions. "Do you think anyone will believe us when we tell them about this place?" Kale chuckled softly. "Probably not at first, but once they hear about the storms, the animals, the snakes." He trailed off, shaking his head. "How could they not see how amazing it is?" Vren nodded slowly. "Earth isn't just dangerous, it's alive. Every part of it fights to survive. Even humans, they're proof that life can thrive no matter what." Lyra sighed, leaning back in her seat. "I still don't know if I'd want to live there. It's too much. But I respect it now. I understand why humans call it home." As the ship entered autopilot mode, the trio gathered in the main cabin to compile their findings. They recorded detailed observations about Earth's ecosystems, its weather patterns, and most importantly, its people. Kale emphasized humanity's resilience, describing how they face challenges with courage and work together to overcome them. Lyra focused on the planet's unpredictability, noting how every creature, plant, and even the environment itself seemed intent on survival. Vren added insights about human adaptability, marveling at how quickly they learned to navigate danger. When they returned to Zoreth, their superiors greeted them with curiosity. The aliens presented their report, sharing images and stories from their time on Earth. At first, the council members were skeptical. A world where danger lurks around every corner. One elder asked, raising an eyebrow, "Why would anyone choose to live there?" Kale stepped forward, his voice steady. "Because it's worth it. Yes, Earth is dangerous, but it's also beautiful. Humans have something we don't. They fight for their lives every day, and because of that, they value them more deeply." Lyra chimed in, holding up a small jar filled with soil she had collected during their trip. "This is Earth," she said simply. "It's wild, unpredictable, and full of risks. But look at what grows in it. Life unlike anything we've ever seen." Vren placed the wooden bird carving on the table in front of the council. "And this is humanity," he explained. "They create, adapt, and endure. They face death daily, but keep moving forward." The elders exchanged glances, clearly impressed by the depth of their insights. One of them leaned forward, his tone thoughtful. "So Earth is not merely a death world. It's a crucible, a place where life tests itself and becomes stronger." "Exactly," Kale replied. "We may never fully understand it, but we can learn from it." After the meeting ended, the three friends walked outside, staring up at the stars. Somewhere far away, Earth continued its chaotic dance, oblivious to the impact it had made on these visitors. Kale smiled faintly, imagining Jake and Emma going about their lives in Pine Ridge. Would they ever wonder what happened to the strange newcomers who had wandered into their town? "I hope they're okay," Lyra murmured, voicing the thought they all shared. Storms, snakes, bears, they deal with so much. "They'll be fine," Vren said confidently. "Humans always are." As the night grew colder, the trio stood quietly beneath the alien sky, reflecting on their journey. Earth had changed them in ways they couldn't have predicted. It had shown them the fragility of life and its incredible strength. Though they were relieved to be home, part of them longed to return someday, to experience Earth's chaos and wonder all over again. In the end, they realized that Earth wasn't just a planet, it was a teacher. And though its lessons were hard-earned, they were worth every challenge. "I don't know," Jake admitted, his voice steady but edged with uncertainty. He tightened his grip on the flashlight, its beam cutting through the darkness as he scanned the trees again. The glowing eyes were gone, but the heavy footsteps continued, slow and deliberate, shaking the ground beneath their feet. Emma stood up quickly, her blanket slipping off her shoulders. "We need to stay calm," she said, though her wide eyes betrayed her fear. It could just be a deer or something. Kale wasn't so sure. The sound was too heavy for a deer. On Zorith, creatures this size didn't exist, or if they did, they were gentle giants that posed no threat. Earth, however, seemed to have a knack for turning everything into a potential danger. He glanced at Lyra, who looked like she might bolt at any second, and then at Vren, whose sharp gaze remained fixed on the shadows. The footsteps grew louder, closer. Then, suddenly, a massive shape emerged from the darkness. It was a grizzly bear, its fur matted and glistening in the firelight. Its nose twitched as it sniffed the air, drawn by the scent of their food. The group froze, their breaths shallow and uneven. "Don't move," Jake whispered urgently, lowering the flashlight slightly. "Bears are usually shy. If we don't provoke it, it'll leave us alone." But the bear didn't seem interested in leaving. It took another step forward, its claws scraping against the ground. Lyra whimpered softly, her hands trembling. Cal wanted to comfort her, but he couldn't tear his eyes away from the animal. His heart pounded in his chest, each beat echoing like a drum roll. Emma slowly reached for a canister tucked into her backpack. "I brought bear spray," she murmured, her voice barely audible. "Just in case." Jake nodded, keeping his focus on the bear. "Good. But we need to scare it off first. Make ourselves look bigger." Without hesitation, he grabbed his jacket and waved it above his head, shouting loudly. Emma followed suit, raising her arms and making noise. Reluctantly, Kale joined in, mimicking their actions despite the lump in his throat. Even Vren stood up, holding a stick like a weapon, though his face remained unreadable. At first, the bear hesitated, its ears flicking back and forth. Then, with a low growl, it reared up on its hind legs, towering over them. Lyra let out a small cry, clutching Cal's arm even tighter. For a moment, it seemed like the bear might charge, but instead, it dropped back down onto all fours and turned away, lumbering back into the forest. The group watched in stunned silence as the massive creature disappeared into the shadows. Only when the sound of its footsteps faded completely did they allow themselves to breathe again. "That was terrifying," Lyra finally managed to say, sinking to the ground. Her hand shook as she brushed strands of hair out of her face. Jake exhaled sharply, running a hand through his hair. "Yeah, well, welcome to Earth. You never know what's going to show up." Emma crouched beside Lyra, offering a reassuring smile. "You handled it well. Bears aren't usually aggressive unless you surprise them or get between them and their cubs." Kale sat down heavily, his mind racing. He had read about Earth's wildlife, but seeing it firsthand was a completely different experience. Everything here was unpredictable. Every rustle in the bushes, every shadow in the night, could mean danger. And yet humans faced these threats daily without batting an eye. Their courage amazed him. Vren remained standing, his gaze still fixed on the forest. "How do you live like this?" he asked quietly, almost to himself. "How do you not spend every moment afraid?" Emma shrugged. "You learn to adapt. Fear doesn't help you survive. It slows you down. So you deal with it, and you keep moving." Jake grinned, trying to lighten the mood. "Besides, where's the fun in life if there's no risk?" Kale chuckled weakly, though he couldn't fully agree. Risk wasn't fun. It was exhausting. Still, he couldn't deny the rush of adrenaline he'd felt during the encounter. Maybe that was part of what made Earth so unique. Here, survival wasn't guaranteed. It was earned. As the fire crackled softly in the background, the group settled back down, their earlier excitement replaced by a newfound respect for the planet around them. For the aliens, the night felt longer than ever, the shadows deeper and more menacing. But as they stared up at the stars, one thought lingered in their minds. Earth truly was a death world. But it was also a place where life fought hardest to thrive. By the time their trip to Earth was nearing its end, Kale, Lyra, and Vren had seen more than they ever imagined. They had faced storms, wild animals, venomous snakes, and countless other dangers that made Earth earn its reputation as a death world. But with each challenge, they also witnessed something else: humanity's incredible ability to adapt, survive, and thrive. One evening, as the sun dipped low on the horizon, the group gathered in the same park where they had first met Jake and Emma. The air was cool, carrying the faint scent of rain from the storm that had passed earlier. Ducks floated lazily on the pond, and children played nearby, laughing and chasing each other. It was peaceful, a stark contrast to the chaos they had experienced just days before. Jake leaned back against a bench, his hands behind his head. "So, what do you guys think of Earth?" he asked, glancing at the aliens. "Not too bad for a death world, huh?" Kale smiled faintly, his mind replaying everything they'd been through. "It's intense," he said after a moment. "I've never seen anything like it." Emma nodded knowingly. "Yeah, Earth isn't for everyone. But there's a kind of beauty in it, don't you think? Everything fights so hard to live." Lyra looked down at her hands, thinking about the snakebite incident and the storm. She still felt uneasy about how unpredictable this planet was, but she couldn't deny Emma's point. "Humans are amazing," she admitted softly. "You face danger every day, but you don't give up." Vren finally spoke up, his voice quiet but firm. "On Zorith, life is safe. Everything works together. Here, everything fights. It's exhausting, but I see why you stay." Jake grinned. "Hey, no pain, no gain, right?" Emma rolled her eyes playfully. "Don't listen to him. He just likes drama." For a while, the group sat in comfortable silence, watching the sky turn shades of orange and pink. Kale thought about all the lessons they'd learned, not just about Earth, but about themselves. Before coming here, he had always admired humans from afar, reading about their history and culture. Now, he understood them in a way books could never explain. Their strength came not from avoiding danger, but from confronting it head-on. Lyra glanced at the children playing near the swings. Even after the storm, they were outside, laughing and running around, as if nothing had happened. "How do you teach kids to be so brave?" she asked. Emma chuckled. "We don't really teach it. They learn by watching us. If we can handle it, they figure they can too." Kale nodded slowly. That made sense. Humans didn't wait for things to get better. They adapted, worked together, and kept going. It was a lesson he knew he would carry with him long after leaving Earth. As night fell, the group prepared to say goodbye. Jake and Emma promised to visit the alien ship one last time before they left. Back in the clearing where they had landed, Kale, Lyra, and Vren stood together, looking up at the sleek spacecraft that would take them home. "This place changed us," Lyra said quietly, breaking the silence. "I didn't expect that." Kale agreed. "Earth showed us what it means to truly live. Not just exist, but fight for it." Vren stared at the forest surrounding them, his expression thoughtful. "We'll tell our people about this. About the dangers, yes, but also about the courage." The sound of footsteps interrupted their thoughts. Jake and Emma appeared, carrying small gifts wrapped in paper. "For you," Emma said, handing one to each of them. "Something to remember us by." Inside the packages were simple trinkets, a rock painted with flowers, a handmade bracelet, and a small wooden carving of a bird. To anyone else, they might have seemed ordinary, but to the aliens, they were priceless reminders of the world they had come to understand, and the friends they had made along the way. "Thank you," Kale said sincerely, "for everything." Jake grinned. "Anytime. Just don't forget to write, or whatever you guys do out there." As the hatch of the spacecraft closed and the engines hummed to life, Kale, Lyra, and Vren looked out the window one last time. Pine Ridge grew smaller and smaller until it disappeared altogether. Earth was harsh, unpredictable, and dangerous, but it was also alive in ways they had never imagined. And though they were eager to return home, part of them would always miss it. In the quiet of space, Vren broke the silence. "Do you think we'll ever come back?" Kale smiled. "Maybe. But even if we don't, Earth will always be a part of us now." The storm hit Pine Ridge with a vengeance. By the time the group reached the edge of the forest, the rain was pouring down in sheets, soaking through their clothes and making the ground slick with mud. Lightning flashed across the sky, illuminating the trees in brief bursts of white light. Thunder followed almost instantly, so loud it seemed to shake the earth beneath their feet. Kale stumbled slightly as his foot sank into the soft soil, but Jake caught him before he could fall. "Careful," Jake shouted over the wind. "It's slippery out here." Emma led the way, her arms wrapped tightly around herself to block the cold. "We should find shelter," she called back, her voice barely audible over the roar of the storm. She pointed toward a cluster of large rocks nearby, partially shielded by overhanging branches. It wasn't much, but it would keep them out of the worst of the rain. The group hurried toward the makeshift refuge, slipping and sliding as they went. Lyra clung to Kale's arm, her wide eyes darting nervously between the sky and the ground. Vren brought up the rear, his movements steady despite the chaos around them. When they finally reached the rocks, they huddled together, shivering as the storm raged on. "This is normal?" Lyra asked, her teeth chattering. Her holographic disguise flickered faintly, struggling to maintain its form in the harsh conditions. Emma nodded, wiping water from her face. "Yeah, storms like this happen all the time. They're intense, but we get through them." Jake grinned, though his expression was more nervous than amused. "Intense is one way to put it. Crazy is another." Kale watched as lightning struck a tree not far away, splitting its trunk in two. The sight sent a chill down his spine. On Zoreth, weather was mild and predictable. Nothing like this raw, untamed fury. Yet, as terrifying as it was, there was something awe-inspiring about the power of Earth's storms. It reminded him of humanity itself, chaotic, unpredictable, but somehow resilient. As the minutes passed, the rain began to ease slightly, though the wind remained strong. In the distance, they could hear voices shouting, people calling out to each other, working together to secure loose objects or help neighbors in need. Jake stood up cautiously, peering out from behind the rocks. "Sounds like folks are already cleaning up," he said. "We should head back soon." Emma nodded. "But let's wait until the worst of it passes. No point risking getting hit by debris." Lyra glanced at her companions, her fear slowly giving way to curiosity. Despite the danger, she couldn't deny the sense of community she'd seen among the townspeople. Even in the middle of a storm, humans came together to protect what mattered most. It was unlike anything she'd ever experienced. When the rain finally slowed to a drizzle, the group emerged from their shelter, squinting against the gray light of the overcast sky. The forest looked different now. Branches littered the ground, puddles formed in every dip and hollow, and the air smelled fresh and clean. As they made their way back toward town, they saw evidence of the storm's impact everywhere. Toppled fences, flooded streets, and even a few damaged rooftops. In the center of Pine Ridge, volunteers were already hard at work. Some used shovels to clear mud from sidewalks, while others handed out blankets and hot drinks to those who had been caught outside. Emma waved to a woman organizing supplies. "That's Mrs. Harper," she explained. "She runs the community center, always first to step up when things go wrong." Kale watched the scene with growing admiration. Humans didn't just endure disasters. They faced them head-on, supporting one another without hesitation. It was a stark contrast to life on Zoreth, where challenges were rare and individualistic solutions were the norm. Vren knelt beside a child who was stacking sandbags alongside adults. The boy grinned up at him, clearly proud of his contribution. For a moment, Vren allowed himself a small smile. Perhaps there was beauty in Earth's unpredictability, not just in its dangers, but in the way it brought people together. By the time they returned to the diner, the storm had moved on, leaving behind a soggy but determined town. As they sat by the window, sipping hot chocolate, Cale turned to his companions. "Do you see now?" he asked softly. "This planet may be dangerous, but it's also alive. And so are the people who live here." Lyra nodded slowly, her earlier fear replaced by understanding. "Yes, I think I do." Vren stared out at the rain-soaked streets, his thoughts quiet but deep. Earth was teaching them lessons they never expected, and maybe, just maybe, those lessons were worth the risks. Inside, the diner was warm and cozy, filled with the smell of fries and grilled meat. The group slid into a booth near the window, and Jake ordered for everyone. While they waited for their food, Emma pulled out her notebook and started sketching pictures of birds she had seen earlier that day. Vren leaned over to look, intrigued by her talent. "You're really good at that," he said quietly, surprising even himself. Emma looked up and smiled. "Thanks. I want to study biology someday. Maybe work with animals." Cale nodded approvingly. "That's impressive. Animals here must be interesting." Emma laughed softly. "Interesting is one way to put it. Just wait until you meet some of them." Her words sent a shiver down Lyra's spine. Interesting didn't sound like a compliment in this context, not on a planet where danger lurked around every corner. But as the evening wore on, the aliens found themselves relaxing slightly. For all its perils, Earth had a certain charm. And perhaps, just maybe, they were starting to understand why humans called it home. That night, the group decided to camp in the forest. Jake and Emma had suggested it earlier, saying it would give the aliens a chance to experience Earth's wilderness up close. Cale was excited about the idea, eager to see what the night held. Lyra, on the other hand, wasn't so sure. The thought of sleeping surrounded by unknown dangers made her uneasy. Vren stayed quiet, as usual, but his sharp eyes scanned the darkening woods with growing suspicion. As the sun dipped below the horizon, the forest transformed. Shadows stretched long across the ground, and the air grew cooler. Crickets began their nightly symphony, their chirps blending with the occasional hoot of an owl. Jake and Emma worked quickly, setting up tents and starting a fire. The flames crackled softly, casting flickering light on their faces. "This is nice, isn't it?" Jake said, leaning back against a log. He tossed another stick into the fire, sending sparks spiraling upward. "Nothing like sitting under the stars." Emma smiled, pulling a blanket around her shoulders. "It's peaceful out here." "Well, usually. Sometimes you get surprises." Lyra glanced at her nervously. "Surprises? Like raccoons trying to steal your food," Emma explained with a laugh. "Or frogs jumping into your tent. Nothing dangerous, just unexpected." Cale chuckled, though he wasn't entirely convinced. Unexpected seemed to be Earth's specialty. Still, he couldn't deny the beauty of the moment. Above them, the sky was clear, dotted with countless stars. Back on Zorith, the night sky was dull compared to this. Here, it felt infinite, alive. Jake leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees. "You guys ever hear ghost stories?" he asked, his tone teasing. Vren frowned. "Ghost stories?" "Yeah, you know, tales about spirits or monsters. People tell them around campfires to scare each other." Jake grinned mischievously. "Want to hear one?" Before anyone could answer, Emma groaned. "Oh no, not that again. Every time we go camping, he does this. It's tradition." Jake protested. "Come on, I'll keep it short." Reluctantly, the group gathered closer to the fire. Jake launched into a story about a hunter who got lost in these very woods years ago. According to legend, he wandered too far from his campsite and angered a pack of wolves. When search parties went looking for him, all they found were his boots and eerie howls echoing through the trees. Cale listened intently, his imagination running wild. On Zorith, stories like this didn't exist. Life there was predictable, safe. Here, even tales carried a sense of danger. When Jake finished, The firelight reflected off Lyra's wide eyes. "Do wolves really live here?" she asked, glancing nervously toward the trees. Emma nodded. "They do. But don't worry. They're more scared of us than we are of them." Lyra wasn't reassured. She wrapped her arms tightly around herself, feeling the weight of the darkness pressing in. The forest seemed quieter now, as if it were holding its breath. Even the crickets had gone silent. Vren noticed it too, his head tilted slightly, listening for something beyond the range of human hearing. There was a faint vibration beneath the ground, almost imperceptible. It reminded him of the tremors they sometimes felt on Zorath before storms. But this was different. This felt deliberate. "Do you feel that?" he whispered, breaking the silence. Everyone turned to look at him. Jake shrugged. "Feel what?" "The ground," Vren said, his voice low. "It's moving." Emma frowned. "Maybe it's just wind shaking the trees." But Kale wasn't so sure. He stood up slowly, scanning the shadows. The hairs on the back of his neck prickled. Something wasn't right. Then, without warning, a loud crash echoed through the forest. A tree branch snapped nearby, followed by the unmistakable sound of heavy footsteps. The group froze, their eyes darting toward the source of the noise. Whatever it was big, and it was coming closer. Jake grabbed a flashlight and shone it into the darkness. For a brief moment, two glowing eyes reflected the light before disappearing behind a cluster of bushes. Lyra gasped, clutching Cal's arm. "What was that?" "I don't know," Jake admitted, his voice. Jake led the way, his steps confident as he navigated the narrow path that wound through the forest. Emma walked beside him, occasionally glancing back at Kale, Lyra, and Vren to make sure they were keeping up. The aliens tried their best to act natural, though every sound, the crunch of leaves underfoot, the distant call of a bird, made them tense. They had studied Earth in school, but nothing could have prepared them for the overwhelming reality of being here. Everything felt alive, unpredictable, and just a little bit dangerous. "So, where are you guys from?" Jake asked casually, breaking the silence. He seemed genuinely curious, though there was a playful edge to his tone. Kale hesitated for a moment before answering. Canada," he said quickly, hoping the name of a distant country would satisfy the question. It wasn't entirely a lie. Their ship had entered Earth's atmosphere near the northern regions before heading south to Pine Ridge. "Canada." "Huh." Jake raised an eyebrow, clearly amused. "You don't sound Canadian." Emma nudged him lightly with her elbow. "Leave them alone, Jake. Not everyone has to sound like a lumberjack." She turned to the group with a kind smile. "Don't mind him. He thinks he's funny." Lyra nodded politely, though her heart was racing. Humans were far more observant than she had expected. She glanced at Vren, who remained quiet, his eyes scanning the trees as if expecting something to leap out at any moment. The tension in the air was palpable, even if Jake and Emma didn't seem to notice. As they continued walking, Emma began pointing out different plants and animals along the way. "See those mushrooms over there? Don't eat them unless you want to spend the night throwing up," she joked, gesturing toward a cluster of red and white fungi growing near the base of a tree. "And watch out for poison ivy. It's everywhere around here." Kale listened intently, fascinated by how much humans knew about their environment. On Zorath, everything was safe and predictable. Here, it seemed like survival depended on constant vigilance. Even the smallest things, a patch of plants or a tiny insect, could pose a threat. He found himself wondering how humans managed not to live in constant fear. The group eventually reached the edge of the forest, where the trees gave way to open fields dotted with wildflowers. In the distance, they could see the rooftops of Pine Ridge, a small town nestled between rolling hills. Smoke curled lazily from chimneys, and the faint hum of activity drifted toward them on the breeze. "This is it," Jake announced, spreading his arms wide. "Home sweet home. Not much to look at, but it's got character." Emma rolled her eyes good-naturedly. Ignore him. He's just mad because no one ever visits this place. Cale smiled, trying to appear relaxed. It looks nice, he said, though his voice betrayed a hint of uncertainty. Nice wasn't exactly the word he would have used. Quaint, maybe, or isolated. Either way, it was clear that Pine Ridge was the kind of place where everyone knew each other, and strangers stood out like sore thumbs. Once they entered the town, Jake and Emma took turns introducing the aliens to various landmarks. The diner where locals gathered for coffee, the library where Emma spent most of her free time, and the old movie theater that only showed films on weekends. The townspeople barely paid them any attention, too busy with their own lives to notice three newcomers wandering around. At one point, they stopped by a park where children played on swings and climbed monkey bars. Cale watched them closely, marveling at how carefree they seemed despite living in such a hazardous world. One boy tripped and scraped his knee, but instead of crying, he brushed himself off and kept playing. Lyra noticed this too and frowned. How could humans be so resilient? Later, as the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the streets, Jake suggested grabbing burgers at the diner. Best food in town, he promised. You can't leave without trying it. The next morning, the group packed up their campsite and headed back to Pine Ridge. The encounter with the bear had left everyone shaken, but it also gave them plenty to talk about. Jake and Emma seemed almost proud of how they'd handled the situation, while Cale, Lyra, and Vren were still processing what had happened. Earth's dangers felt more real now, not just stories or theories, but actual threats that could strike at any moment. When they reached the town, the streets were already bustling with activity. People carried bags of groceries, chatted on porches, and called out greetings to one another as they passed by. To Cale, it all seemed so ordinary, almost mundane. But he couldn't help noticing the underlying strength in these simple acts. On Zoreth, life was predictable and safe, but here, every day felt like a victory against unseen odds. Emma led the group to a small diner on the corner of Main Street. Best breakfast in town, she promised, holding the door open for them. Inside, the air smelled of coffee, bacon, and freshly baked bread. Booths lined the walls, and a long counter stretched along one side, where a few locals sat sipping coffee and reading newspapers. A waitress greeted them with a warm smile. "Morning, Emma. Usual spot?" "Yeah, thanks, Rita," Emma replied, sliding into a booth near the window. Jake slid in beside her, leaving space for the aliens across from them. Cale hesitated before sitting down, still unsure about how to act in such a human setting. Lyra and Vren followed his lead, keeping their movements slow and deliberate. As they waited for their food, Cale listened to the conversations around them. At the next table, two men talked about an upcoming storm. "They're saying it'll hit tonight," one of them said, shaking his head. "Hope the river doesn't flood again." His companion nodded grimly. "Wouldn't be the first time. This place always gets hit hard." Cale glanced at Emma. "Storms are common here." She shrugged. "Pretty much. We get rain, wind, sometimes even hail. It's just part of living in Pine Ridge." Lyra frowned. "And people stay, even when it's dangerous." Emma smiled faintly. "Where else would we go? This is home." Vren stayed quiet, absorbing the exchange. He found it strange how humans accepted danger as part of their lives. Back on Zoreth, storms were rare and mild, barely worth noticing. Here, they were forces to be reckoned with, yet no one seemed to question why they endured them. Their food arrived soon after, plates piled high with pancakes, eggs, and crispy bacon. Cale stared at his meal, marveling at the variety. Human cuisine was far more diverse than anything he'd experienced before. Tentatively, he took a bite of pancake drizzled with syrup. The sweetness surprised him, and he couldn't help but smile. "This is good," he admitted. Jake grinned. "Told you. Best in town." After breakfast, Emma suggested visiting the local library. We can show you some books about Earth's wildlife, she said. Might help you understand things better. The library was quiet and cozy, filled with rows of shelves and soft lighting. Emma wandered off to find books, while Jake showed Cale and the others a display of old photographs depicting Pine Ridge over the years. There were pictures of floods, wildfires, and even a tornado that had torn through the town decades ago. In each image, though, people were working together to rebuild and recover. This place has been through a lot, Jake said, pointing to a photo of volunteers stacking sandbags along the riverbank. But we always pull through. Lyra studied the images carefully, her expression thoughtful. Humans don't give up easily, do they? Nope, Jake replied proudly. Not our style. Later, as they walked back toward the edge of town, dark clouds began gathering overhead. The wind picked up, carrying the sharp scent of rain. Emma glanced at the sky nervously. Looks like the storm's coming sooner than expected. You guys should probably head back to your ship. Cale shook his head. No, we want to see it. Storms on Earth, they're different from what we know. Emma hesitated, then nodded. All right, but stick close. And whatever you do, don't stand under tall trees during lightning. The aliens exchanged glances, silently agreeing to stay cautious. As the first drops of rain began to fall, they hurried toward the forest, eager to witness another side of Earth's unpredictable nature. For all its dangers, this planet continued to fascinate them and teach them lessons they never expected to learn. The morning after the storm, Pine Ridge was a mix of chaos and calm. The streets were muddy, with fallen branches scattered everywhere. But the townspeople were already working together to clean up. Jake and Emma joined in, helping stack broken wood into piles while Cale, Lyra, and Vren watched from the sidelines. The aliens wanted to help too, but they weren't sure how to contribute without drawing attention to themselves. As they stood there, unsure what to do, a loud shout came from nearby. Snake! Someone yelled, pointing toward a flooded area near the edge of town. A group of people rushed over, including Jake and Emma. Curious, the aliens followed cautiously, staying a few steps behind. When they arrived, they saw the source of the commotion. A large snake coiled defensively in the shallow water, its scales glistening wetly in the sunlight. It wasn't moving much, but its presence had clearly alarmed the crowd. One man held a long stick, trying to nudge it away from a group of children who had been playing nearby. Emma stepped forward, her notebook tucked under her arm. It's okay, she said calmly. That's just a water moccasin. They're venomous, but they won't bite unless provoked. Cale stared at the snake, his heart racing. Even though it was trapped in the floodwater, it looked dangerous, its body thick and muscular, its eyes cold and calculating. On Zoreth, snakes didn't exist. The closest thing was a small, harmless creature that ate insects. This was something entirely different. Suddenly, one of the children stumbled, slipping on the wet ground. She landed awkwardly, splashing close to the snake. Before anyone could react, the snake lunged forward, striking quickly before retreating back into the water. Everyone gasped, and the girl cried out, clutching her leg. Emma sprang into action. Stay still, she instructed firmly, kneeling beside the girl. She examined the bite carefully, her hands steady despite the tension in the air. We need to get her to the clinic. Now. Jake grabbed the girl's hand, helping her stand. Come on, I'll carry you if I have to. Together, he and Emma guided her away from the scene, the crowd parting to let them through. Cale, Lyra, and Vren followed silently, their minds racing. At the clinic, a nurse quickly took charge. She cleaned the wound and administered an antivenom shot, explaining that the girl would be fine as long as she rested. Emma stayed by her side, offering words of comfort. You're going to be okay, she said softly. Just take it easy for a bit. Lyra watched everything unfold with wide eyes. Is this normal? She whispered to Cale. Do humans face things like this every day? Cale nodded slowly. It seems so, but look at how they handle it. No panic, no giving up, just action. Vren remained quiet, his gaze fixed on the snakebite. He thought about how easily the situation could have turned deadly. Back on Zorith, injuries like this were rare, and usually minor. Here, even a single mistake could cost someone their life. Later, as the group walked back toward the center of town, Jake explained more about Earth's venomous creatures. Snakes aren't the only ones you have to watch out for, he said. Spiders, scorpions, even some fish can be dangerous. You've got to know what to look for. Emma added, but once you learn, you start to see patterns. Nature has rules, even if they're not always obvious. Kale listened intently, impressed by their knowledge. Humans didn't just survive. They adapted. Every challenge they faced taught them something new, making them stronger and smarter. It was both humbling and inspiring. That evening, as the sun set over Pine Ridge, the aliens sat together on a hill overlooking the town. The damage from the storm was still visible, but the streets were alive with activity. People laughed, talked, and worked side by side, proving once again that they wouldn't let anything keep them down. Lyra sighed, her earlier fear replaced by admiration. I understand now why Earth is called a Deathworld, she said quietly. But I also see why humans call it home. Kale nodded. It's not just about danger. It's about resilience, about finding ways to thrive no matter what. Vren stared at the horizon, his expression thoughtful. For the first time, he felt a flicker of respect, not just for humanity, but for the planet itself. Earth was harsh, unpredictable, and unforgiving, but it was also alive in a way that nothing else in the galaxy seemed to be. And maybe, just maybe, that made it worth exploring. The spacecraft descended silently through the atmosphere, its sleek metallic surface shimmering as it adjusted to the unfamiliar pull of gravity. Inside, 3 alien students sat nervously, their wide eyes fixed on the view screen that showed a swirling mix of blue and green below them. This was Earth, a planet they had only read about in textbooks, a place known across the galaxy as a death world. For Kale, Lyra, and Vren, this trip was both exciting and terrifying. They were here for one reason: to understand why Earth had earned such a grim reputation. Kale leaned forward in his seat, his fingers tapping anxiously on the armrest. He was the most curious of the group, always eager to explore new ideas and experiences. To him, Earth wasn't just dangerous, it was fascinating. Humans lived here, after all. And if there was one thing Kale admired, it was how these beings managed to survive despite so many challenges. Beside him, Lyra fidgeted with her wristband, her expression cautious. She didn't share Kale's enthusiasm. Instead, she felt uneasy about setting foot on a planet where even the smallest creatures could pose a threat. Vren, the quietest of the trio, stared out the window with a mix of awe and apprehension. His mind raced with questions, but he kept them to himself, preferring to observe rather than speak. As the ship broke through the clouds, the view became clearer. Below them stretched vast forests, winding rivers, and towering mountains. It was beautiful, yet something about it felt off. The air seemed thick with energy, almost alive, as though the planet itself was watching them. The pilot's voice crackled over the intercom. "We're approaching the landing zone. Prepare for descent." The trio exchanged glances, each silently wondering what awaited them on the surface. Moments later, the ship touched down softly in a clearing surrounded by dense trees. The hatch opened with a soft hiss, revealing a world unlike anything they had ever seen. The air smelled strange, earthy, and fresh, with hints of something wild and untamed. Birds chirped overhead, their calls echoing through the forest. A gentle breeze rustled the leaves, creating patterns of light and shadow on the ground. It looked peaceful, but the aliens knew better than to let their guard down. Stepping outside, they activated their holographic disguises, cloaking themselves in human forms. Kale appeared tall and lanky, with short brown hair and glasses that made him look studious. Lyra chose a more reserved appearance, with long blonde hair and a calm demeanor. Vren opted for a simple look, keeping his features neutral and unassuming. Together, they resembled ordinary humans, or at least close enough to pass unnoticed. Their first task was to find someone who could guide them. Pine Ridge, the nearby town marked on their map, seemed like the best place to start. As they walked along a narrow dirt path leading away from the clearing, they couldn't help but notice the sheer variety of life around them. Insects buzzed past their ears, some larger than any bug they had ever encountered. Plants grew in chaotic abundance, their shapes and colors unfamiliar. Even the soil beneath their feet felt different, damp and rich with nutrients. Suddenly, a rustling sound caught their attention. From behind a cluster of bushes emerged two figures, a boy and a girl, both teenagers. The boy, wearing a baseball cap and carrying a backpack, grinned when he saw them. "Hey, you guys lost?" he asked, his tone friendly but curious. The girl beside him, holding a notebook and pen, studied them intently. "No," Cale replied quickly, trying to sound confident. "We're, exchange students, just exploring." The boy chuckled. "Well, welcome to Pine Ridge. I'm Jake, and this is Emma. If you're looking for adventure, you've come to the right place." Emma smiled warmly. "Yeah, we can show you around. Just watch out for the snakes. They don't take kindly to visitors." Lyra stiffened at the mention of snakes, but Cale forced a laugh. "Thanks. We'll keep that in mind." As they followed Jake and Emma toward the town, the aliens couldn't shake the feeling that they were stepping into something far more complex and dangerous than they had anticipated. But for now, they focused on blending in, determined to uncover the secrets of this mysterious Deathworld. The next morning, Jake and Emma met the aliens at the edge of town, ready to take them deeper into the forest. "Today," Jake said with a grin, "we're going off the beaten path. You'll see some real wilderness." Cal's eyes lit up at the idea, while Lyra shot him a nervous glance. Vren simply adjusted his backpack, staying silent as usual. As they walked, the air grew cooler, and the sounds of the town faded behind them. The forest was alive with noise. Birds chirping, leaves rustling, and the occasional snap of a twig underfoot. Emma pointed out different trees and plants, explaining their names and uses. "This one's called poison oak," she said, gesturing to a shrub with shiny green leaves. "Touch it, and your skin will break out in a rash." Lyra instinctively took a step back. "Why would a plant do that?" she asked, her voice tinged with disbelief. Emma shrugged. "Plants here have defenses too. They don't want to get eaten any more than animals do." Cale nodded thoughtfully. On Zoreth, plants were harmless, existing only to provide food or beauty. Here, even the vegetation seemed intent on survival. It was both fascinating and unsettling. After an hour of hiking, they reached a clearing where sunlight streamed through the canopy, illuminating a small pond. Ducks paddled lazily across the water, and dragonflies darted around the surface. For a moment, the scene felt peaceful, but then a loud rustling came from the bushes nearby. Everyone froze. Out stepped a wild boar, its tusks gleaming in the sunlight. The animal snorted, glaring at the group with dark, beady eyes. Jake raised his hand slowly, signaling for everyone to stay calm. "Don't move," he whispered. "They're usually harmless unless you provoke them." But the boar wasn't alone. Two smaller ones emerged from the brush, standing protectively beside the larger one. Lyra's breath caught in her throat. She had seen images of these creatures in her studies, but seeing one up close was entirely different. Its muscles rippled beneath its coarse fur, and its stance radiated aggression. "Back away slowly," Jake instructed, his voice steady despite the tension in the air. He grabbed a stick from the ground and waved it gently, trying to distract the animals. Emma followed his lead, mimicking his movements. Reluctantly, Cale and the others did the same. The boars hesitated, watching them warily. Then, with a final snort, the largest one turned and disappeared into the underbrush, its companions close behind. The group let out a collective sigh of relief. What was that? Lyra blurted once they were safely away from the clearing. Her hands trembled slightly as she spoke. That thing could have killed us. Jake chuckled nervously. Nah, they're just territorial. As long as you don't corner them, they won't attack. Kale frowned. Territorial. Even the animals here fight over space. Emma nodded. Pretty much everything fights for survival. It's how things work on Earth. Vren remained quiet, his mind racing. Back on Zoreth, life was harmonious. Creatures coexisted without conflict, sharing resources peacefully. Here, every living thing seemed locked in a constant struggle. It was exhausting. And yet, somehow, beautiful in its own way. Later that afternoon, the group encountered another challenge. Insects. Swarms of mosquitoes buzzed around them, drawn to their sweat and body heat. No matter how much they swatted, the tiny pests kept coming. Lyra slapped at her arms in frustration, leaving red welts behind. How do humans deal with this? She muttered. It's part of life, Emma replied with a shrug. You get used to it after a while. Kale watched her closely. Despite the discomfort, Emma didn't seem bothered by the bugs. Instead, she focused on observing a colorful butterfly perched on a nearby flower. Look at this one, she said excitedly. Isn't it amazing? He nodded, though his thoughts were elsewhere. Every creature they encountered today, from the boars to the mosquitoes, had reminded him just how hostile Earth could be. Yet humans thrived here, adapting to challenges that would have overwhelmed most species. Their resilience was remarkable. By the time they returned to Pine Ridge, the sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. The aliens were tired but couldn't deny the day had been eye-opening. As they parted ways with Jake and Emma, promising to meet again tomorrow, Kale turned to his companions. Do you see now why Earth is called a Deathworld? He asked softly. Lyra sighed. Yes, but I also see why humans are so strong. They face danger every day, and they keep going. Vren nodded silently, his expression unreadable. For all its dangers, Earth was teaching them lessons they never expected to learn.